Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Plant Etc. Today, I wanted to kind of flip the script a little bit and talk about the successes. In the last video, I mentioned all the difficulties that I had on the plants that didn't grow. But this time, we're starting with the winners. Here we go. Okay, the winner is onions. First one up, yes, onions did really, really well in my garden this year. I was really happy with them. These are little plants that I started from seeds. I don't usually start my onions from sets. I find that when I do them from sets, I usually end up with a lot of them bolting. So I've avoided doing that over the years. That's been my experience. Your experience might be a little different. So instead, I start them from seeds in little trays. You know, I have a few varieties that I use. For the yellow ones, I use the Bridger or the Patterson. For the red ones, I use the Desert Rose or the Rosa di Milano. Those are the four kind of varieties that I use in my garden. I find they are very successful. You will see in the end there how lovely they look. So throughout the year, I start my onions usually early in January, or if I'm planting for the fall, I'll start them like in July to be planted out in September. The process is the same. I start the seeds. As they grow, I tend to trim them to make sure they don't become a bit of a big mess at the end. So I do trim my onions. Not everybody does that, but I find that that's a nice way of keeping them nice and tidy. I don't plant them out until they look a bit like they do right there, which is about a pencil size. So just keep them indoors until they start to look a little bit stronger. Once they are nice and vibrant, then you can put them out. Don't plant them too deep. Onions tend to grow on the surface, so the deeper you put them, the harder it is for the poor plant to kind of come out and bulb up. So I don't go too deep, maybe a couple of inches down when I plant them. You can see here, I'm showing you how lovely my onions were looking earlier on in the spring, kind of spring, late summer. They are vibrant. They are nice and straight. They look just gorgeous. I was quite happy with how they look. So these are the red ones that you see on screen right there. And then I'll show you my yellow ones were just as fabulous. They were just as big. They were planted next to each other. There's no issues with cross-pollination with your onions. So you can definitely put them side by side. That's not an issue. You're not going to end up with pinkish onions if you mix up the varieties. So do what you can, put them in a nice spot, nice sunny space. So this is great. You'll know when your onions are ready to be picked. When they start to kind of bend over a little bit like that, they'll start to fold. It just means that the plant is now ready. If they don't do it by themselves, you can also kind of bend them a little bit to just get them to start to dry out a little bit more. You'll also see that some of the leaves start to yellow a little bit at the tips and here and there. That means they're ready, that they're no longer need to keep on growing. That usually takes a few months, but you'll see they'll just kind of flop over just by themselves, one or two of them. And if the rest of them haven't done that yet, you just do that yourself. To make sure that your onions grow as big and strong as mine, of course, you have to fertilize them throughout the season. You know, a good nitrogen booster is good at the beginning. Some biochar, bone meal, blood meal, all of that are excellent to feed your onions. Keep feeding them until they're ready to ensure that you have really nice big bulbs like you see there. They are just wonderful. It's a great treat to have them throughout the season. So you'll see I'll start here showing you how I pick them. Of course, when you're handling your onions, when you're going to be picking them, make sure you handle them with care because they are fragile at that point. The skin has not hardened off yet. You can see right there, I'm starting to pick my onions and you'll see how beautiful they are. You just need a fork, I was using a trowel in this case. You just kind of lift them out of the ground. You clean them off a little bit so it's not a big deal. It doesn't take too much of an effort, especially if you have really good soil. You can see right there, I'm lifting one of them up and just kind of carefully going around the plant to try and get them out of the soil without damaging them. So try not to use any big kind of fork. They're really delicate at this point. They're still really, like I said, the skin hasn't completely dried off. Just clean them off as much as you can there. Keep the roots. I don't wash mine or rinse them with water at this point. I literally just grab them like this, and then I'm going to hang them in a well-ventilated space. That can be inside your garage, anywhere where you can kind of hang them under a cover. If you have a good porch and there's cover for that porch, you can also use that. You just don't want to leave them out in the rain because it will damage them and it will not allow you to keep them for as long. You can see the beauties that I had here. I'm showing you how big they are. They were basically as big as my hand. The yellow and the red ones were just as good. So I was really, really happy this year with the onions. I kept them for quite a bit. When did I pick? I picked those around July about. That's when they were about ready. So around the same time as garlic is ready. So that second week of July, that's when I picked them. Then after that, I hung them for about 3 weeks to a month. You can eat them, of course, right away too. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But if you do want to preserve them and keep them for a few months, you can do so. So I picked them around July. We just finished eating our last one in December. So, we do eat a lot of onions, basically every meal. There's some kind of an onion piece. I don't cut off the top or anything until they've kind of dried out a little bit. I hang them for quite a while, like I said, about 3 weeks. And then once they are ready, they'll be all dried, what you would expect to see for onions. They'll be all yellowed and dried. And then at that point, you can kind of clean them up a little bit and then put them in a basket. And then that would be great. Then you can keep them for quite a while. I just put them in a clear basket with some holes in it, to ventilate it, I should say, ventilated basket. And then the skin will be nice and hard and crispy at that point. And then there won't be any issues with you handling them or bringing them into your home, keeping them on the counter and things like that. I don't keep any of my onions to kind of reuse as sets. Like I said, I just start all of my onions from seeds. That's what I'll do again. And I started some of them later on. You'll see that in this video. Now, moving on to the next winter in my garden, and this time it's garlic. Yes, garlic also did really well in my garden. So it was just a festival of alliums this year. So the garlics did really, really well. I started them in October, so around Halloween. I always remember this because I do like the vampire Halloween thing. That's when I start my garlic. So I started them at that point. You can see them here in early spring. There was still some snow on the ground. They pop up, and here they are in very, very early spring. We're talking probably February. They're kind of just, coming out of the ground. I mulch my garlic heavily to make sure they don't get too soaking wet. I'm in zone 8 on the West Coast, and we just get a lot of rain. So I want to make sure they don't get waterlogged too much. So I do put a lot of leaves on them in the fall when I plant them. So later on, like in February, March, what I do is I remove a lot of that mulch because I want to make sure that the soil kind of heats up and that things kind of dry out as much as possible because, like I said, we do get a lot of rain on the West Coast. So I remove a lot of the mulch, and then at that point, I will fertilize them in the springtime. I will add some blood meal. So again, back to the vampire theme. Yes, add some blood meal to your garlics to really help them along. And any other kind of fertilizer, really any good balanced fertilizer will do. If you have some worm casting that you can either purchase in a bag or you can produce your own, which I'll have a video on how you produce your own later on. You can also use that. Some good compost, about 2 inches of good compost also added around the plant is just as good. And of course, when you were planting your garlic back in October, you would have added some compost to the soil before planting them and doing that. But yeah, garlic is such an easy plant and so rewarding. It's amazing what you can do with it. It's a staple in our house, so no concerns about planting more and more every year. You will see that garlic is ready. You'll really notice that the garlic is ready. It starts to yellow, similar to onions too. You'll see the tip of them start to yellow a little bit. You will also see scapes on the garlics, which are these little curly whirly kind of flowery plants that you see it starting to produce. You got to make sure you take that out. If you don't take that away, your garlic bulb will not produce as well as it actually could. It won't bulb up really big because the nutrients are going to go to that little head there that you're seeing on screen, and it's going to produce like a little flower. I mean, it's really beautiful to look at, but that's not what we really want to eat. You can eat all parts of the garlic. So even that tip, when you take it out, you can chop it up and you can eat it. But really what you're after is the bulb. So you try and diminish the number of weeks that those little things are on, that the scapes are on. So remove all your scape, put them aside, and then you keep an eye on your garlic, and you will see right there, you can really see the yellowing of the leaves. So that means your garlic is ready to be picked. That's usually for me planting in October, like I said, around Halloween. That'll be ready about first week to second week of July. And what I try to do is I stop watering for a little bit, about a week before or 2 weeks before I know I'm going to pick them. I will stop watering to make sure that everything is nice and dry around them, and that the garlic itself, the bulb, doesn't split. I had a couple of varieties of garlic, and I think that's what I'm trying to show here is I had some elephant garlic. We were just kind of tucked away at another end of the garden. And then at the front where you saw the main part there, that was my regular red Russian garlic that I planted. And that's the varieties, again, that I've planted this year. I've done the same thing again where I've planted the red Russian and the elephant garlic. Now you can see the bounty that we got. There was tons and tons. So pretty much 100% success, which I was really, really happy with. Do not cut the top or do anything yet because you can use that to hang them. I usually don't even trim the bottom right away. I wait for it to dry a little bit, then I trim and clean it up. And then I hang them in a well-ventilated place. For us, that's somewhere in the garage. So you just hang them again for about 3 weeks to a month. You just let them dry out. And then once they've dried, you can cut off the tops and keep them in a nice, cool area again in another basket where you can have access to them as needed. So really happy, like I said, this year with my onions and my garlic. Everything looked marvelous and turned out really, really well. So really pleased with that. Now, the other piece is I have some honorable mentions to make, which I'm pretty happy to with. They did pretty good, not too bad, not too bad. Some honorable mentions, yeah. I have some zucchinis, which again, I started on the windowsill, just a few plants, and they ended up looking marvelous. Here I'm showing you putting them in the garden at the beginning of May, just a few plants like that. I think I did 3 different varieties, usual yellow, green zucchini, and then a stripe version. Here they are growing, and you see how big and beautiful they are. The plants were gorgeous. They really, really produced quite a bit. I had them in a really good location this year, so I was quite happy with my production of zucchinis. The other honorable mention is basil. Basil also did really well in my garden. I usually plant my basil with my tomatoes. They're a good companion plant that way. I usually do the basil in the middle and then the tomatoes on each side. So the basil plant did really well, and I ended up with some wonderful pesto. Here you go. Now we start over again. And I started again my onions seeds. I started them July 16th and I planted out September 16th. The varieties again that I did Patterson and I did Patterson and Desert Rose, yes. And these are going to overwinter in the garden. So I planted a bunch of them, and I do cover them with like a little mesh to make sure the birds don't get to them. And otherwise, I don't even bother too much with Cover-O or kind of a blanket or plastic because I am, like I said, in zone 8. We don't get any very harsh winter. I do put some leaves on them, similar to the garlic again, to make sure they don't get too waterlogged. But they were looking really great. I planted them again, like I said, once they kind of looked like a little pencil. I put them in the ground. So they are looking good right now. They're still growing. It's currently December. They're still in the ground. They're fine. I used a little bit of a hoop, like I said, and I put a mesh on them. The The next thing I did start again is my hard neck garlic, the purple Russian. So it's excellent. I called it red Russian, I think a few minutes ago. I meant the purple Russian. So, the usual, you dig some holes. I put some worm casting in each one of the holes. So a little bit of compost. You grab one of your cloves. I mean, if you haven't planted garlic before, it's pretty straightforward. Just kind of dig, not very far, right? So just put them down and put, like I said, a little bit of compost or worm casting in the hole and put them down. You don't need to go too deep. The deeper you go, again, the more the bulb has to struggle to come up. But in my case, because I know the ground doesn't freeze, I'm fairly safe not to have to go too deep. If you're in a different zone, you may have to go deeper. Just do a little bit of research and you'll find out how far down you have to go. I think I go about 3 to 4 inches on mine. I mean, you can literally see it still kind of popping out there. So not that deep. The hole is a little deeper, but there's compost and other things added in the hole when I do that. If you haven't planted your garlic yet, and you can still do that in the springtime too, same with your onions. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Have a wonderful gardening season and happy gardening as usual. Thank you for watching.